Hello and welcome to another episode of our Fireside Chat, Legally Speaking with Kochhar. My name is Raj Chakrabarti. I am the Senior Resident Partner of Kochhar and Company, Mumbai office, and I'll be your host today. So today we are not going to talk about law, legal issues, case laws that we would normally discuss. Today our focus is actually on the individual, the lawyer, the professional. More specifically, the question is, or the discussion will be about the journey of a lawyer from the offices of a law firm to the general counsel's office in a corporate environment. Now, what does this journey entail? How does one adapt to the new scenario, new perspective, so on and so forth? So, to discuss all these and more, we have a very distinguished guest amongst us, Christopher Krishnamurthy, who is the Group General Counsel of InterGlobe Enterprises. Chris is someone I have known for many years, have worked with him as colleagues and then as friend also. So very welcome, a warm welcome to you, Chris.
Thanks, Raj. It's great to be here. Great to reconnect again.
So, before we begin, I would like to just read out a few things, Chris, from your bio, because it's extremely important that we understand who we are speaking to. So, in his role as the Group General Counsel at InterGlobe Enterprises, Chris oversees the legal function within the InterGlobe Group and plays a key role in managing strategic legal matters that impact various business verticals of the group. Chris has over 25 years of experience in the field of law, and that includes 8 years as an in house lawyer. Prior to joining Interglobe, Chris had been with Mahindra and Mahindra. He had headed the corporate M&A team, and he had also worked with a number of leading law firms, including Jones Day, Kochhar and Company, White and Case, etc. And in his private practice, Chris has specialized mainly on matters relating to cross-border M&A, private equity, venture capital funds, etc. And he has worked in multiple jurisdictions, both as an Indian advocate as well as an English solicitor. And jurisdictions would include the UK, Russia, and of course, India. Chris holds a master's degree in international banking and finance from King's College London and a bachelor's degree in law from the University of Delhi. So, with that, let's jump into the questions and discussions with Chris. I promise my viewers that this is going to be one of the best and most interesting sessions that we have ever recorded. So, straight away, Chris, you have kind of done that transition from a law firm to the in house role about 8 years ago. So, what prompted you to make that decision? What prompted you to make that move?
So, Raj, thanks for the opportunity. And I must say that as our viewers should know, we worked for a long time together at Kochhar and Company. And I think to start with, I think I should say that in all the roles that I worked with as external counsel, including at Kochhar and Company, I always found that there was a great focus on putting yourself into the client's shoes and understanding the requirements of business. And I think so that is something that was put into my head at a very early stage. So, I think it was only natural that there was this curiosity in me about how business functions and an increasing curiosity as time went on about the role of in-house counsel. I think added to that is perhaps I would say that what really interested me about the legal profession was the desire to deal with problems and come up with solutions, and my desire to look at targets was perhaps less less important. It was less of a driver for me. That's I should say there are a lot of excellent lawyers out there who are able to do both, but I think in my case, that um, the pressure that one has in firms to manage targets and get business. That was, I think, something that was of less interest to me. And at the same time, I was lucky that the Indian in-house market was developing in such a way that was there was this trend um, towards getting people from law firms increasingly to move into in-house roles. And I moved fairly late in my career, actually. So I was always already I suppose more than 15, 17 years as an in-house as an external lawyer before I moved in-house. So I was lucky I was able to get this role within Mahindra and Mahindra that worked very well for me because it was a transactional role. um, and there was the mandate was really to set up an in-house M&A and corporate advisory team of a kind that didn't really exist in a lot of Indian companies at that time. So it was a combination of my own desire, the interesting role that was available, and I'm very happy that I made the move.
I hear you, Chris. And in fact, what you mentioned, I guess I hear something similar from some of my other in house friends as well who have done this transition from law firm world to the in house role. You did mention something which is very interesting, which is essentially the how the role of the GC has evolved. And probably that's another driving factor. But I'll come to that in a moment. But let me first ask you this question. Now that you have spent 8 years in the in house corporate environment, how do you think the perspective differs from being a law firm partner or basically a law firm lawyer as a private practitioner? How does the perspective differs now, professionally speaking?
So I think the of course one is always first and foremost a lawyer.
Correct.
And I think we should always remember that, or at least in my case, I always need to remember that I am not an MBA. I'm not you know, I don't know Excel. I'm not an expert on valuation methodologies and all that stuff. My core competence is law. But having said that, I think the perspective that we need to adopt is slightly different from that of an external lawyer, because an external lawyer is great at first of all knowing the law, right, and also coming up with very innovative solutions and workarounds and all that kind of thing. And of course that is something that we need. I would say that in-house lawyers need to work hard to be up there with the best of the best, or at least to be able to keep pace with other excellent legal minds that you're working with, who may be providing outside advice. But at the same time, you the reason that you have an in-house lawyer is really to help business to make judgment calls. Now those judgment calls may not always be based purely on what the law may or may not allow you to do. There are often cases where you would have an external lawyer who will tell you, oh, but you can do this, and give you a very clever workaround. But you must remember always that you need to think long term. You need to take into account things like shareholder perceptions or shareholder appetite for risk. You need to take into account board member sensitivities, public perception, importantly, the view of the regulator, all these kind of things. So you need to develop this this sense of good judgment, and it's not enough just to, as I said, know the law. So that's one important thing. The other thing is, I think it's important to be able to tell uh, your business that they shouldn't be doing something. I think I've been an external counsel for a long time, and I think many times there is pressure from businesses to on lawyers to come up with a solution.
Yeah.
And it may be something that is sort of you know not a perfect solution, but it seems to be sort of 70% doable and 30% risky. And I think as in-house counsel, that's when you really need to lay out to business what the implications of that 30% risk is, and explain to them what is the worst case scenario that could happen, and then get people sign in as to whether they're comfortable with doing that, or simply tell people this is not going to happen on my watch. So that is something that I think that's not really the job of the external counsel as much as it is of the in-house counsel.
No, very interesting perspective, Chris. So, what you are effectively saying is that as an in house counsel, as an in house lawyer, you are actually taking the call, which we, sitting on the other side of the table as external advisors to the companies, perhaps we all don't do that. We kind of give the opinion, but we don't say, do this or don't do that, right?
Let me say, in most cases, that is not the expected mandate. However, there are exceptional external lawyers on which a lot, you may have corporates who
Mm,
rely on them heavily.
mm.
Um, but I would say that's more the exception than the rule. And a lot of that comes perhaps from a time when in-house lawyers were not as empowered as they are today, and as I believe they should be.
So I think this sets it up nicely. In-house counsels are empowered. Let me hear your perspective on this. That what change have you seen both in India and since you have worked overseas abroad in terms of the role of the GC evolving? What is your take on that?
Look, I think the most stark difference was, earlier in when we were young and new in our
We are still
careers.
young, Chris. Sorry, on a lighter note, I think you
let
look
me say let me say younger and newer.
okay. Absolutely. Mm,
So at that time, if you
mm,
will remember, because we are
mm,
of the same vintage,
right.
uh, one would see these ads
Mm,
for in-house roles,
mm,
which would typically be company secretary come head legal, and they were not called general counsel roles, they were head legal. So
okay.
legal was a function that in those days were typically, and I remember speaking to people, in some cases going to interviews or speaking with consultants, where the role was focused on doing mainly two things. One is handling litigation, every company has
Mm,
litigation, and secondly doing the contracting.
mm,
Okay. And thirdly, of course, if it was combined, as in it was in many cases, with a company secretary role, then the GC also took charge of the company secretarial requirements, and that in fact was perhaps maybe in many cases 50% of the job profile.
mm,
So the point being that it was handling a lot of fairly routine work, and not really dealing with, or the expectation was not that the head legal would deal with um, you know uh, highly unusual situations, or or deal with a lot of strategic decision making, for which you would typically go to an external counsel. So
sure.
you would go to the big firms, and the managing partner would play a role in that and all that. And look, obviously that does have its advantages, and it's not as if we don't do that anymore. But having said that, as companies become more sophisticated, and I think there is a desire to have somebody always on call, number one, and number two, matters might be very sensitive, where you cannot go to uh, big firms which are also advising a number of competitors or similar people, where confidentiality issues of potential conflict of interest and all that become very important. So um, but as I said, external counsel still play a very important role. um, so the so the, so I would say that's one advantage, that you have legal people, legal expertise that is in-house, that is dedicated. um, Also, I think what has happened, generally speaking, and this is something that impacts the entire industry, is that corporate lawyers have become a lot more important in the general scheme of things. And I think there are perhaps a couple of reasons for that. One is that as Indian corporates have become more and more used to doing business outside India and also working on bigger transactions, um, they've worked with international counterparties. They've worked with um, international law firms. I think the desire for higher quality legal advice has increased. I think there was perhaps a time where um, a legal dispute was seen as something that could be managed. But now I think people understand that the stakes are extremely high. You need the best lawyers. Also, I think the number of deals in which PE participation is there, that has also increased, and I think that has exponentially increased the demand for high quality legal advice. So you will have a number of corporates where you have PE investors holding a small minority percentage, but then they will bring good lawyers to the table, and you need uh, you know other lawyers. If you are a strategic sitting there, you also need to have your good legal support. And so generally, I think that the insistence on having top quality legal advice has increased. And then the question is, if you are a corporate, like in my old um, in the company I was with, formerly Mahindra and Mahindra, there was so many deals happening.
Mm.
It didn't make sense to keep going to external counsel for so many deals. It made sense to have somebody who was in house and have to have a dedicated team that could deal with a significant portion of the work in house, and then you would still go to external counsel, but then you would go to external counsel for high value advice,
Sure.
or advice where your team may not have the bandwidth to handle, for example, due diligence work or things like that, or for for sector specific advice, or advice in respect of certain specific regulatory issues.
Oh, sure. And in fact, Chris, what you mentioned, this kind of echoes our experience also, because, like you said, back in the days when, say, we were much younger, like you put it, the kind of work that would get outsourced by companies would be sometimes contract drafting, contract vetting, small regulatory opinions. Of course, there were deals, litigations, that's there. But I think increasingly what has happened is while the business has got more and more sophisticated, externalized, internationally focused, uh, where many of these events, the business events, are driven by investors such as PEs and all. So companies felt the need to get more and more people onboarded who are within the same system, and you look for external help. That's my experience for high end work, or like you said, bandwidth issues. We are seeing that increasingly. I mean, there are very few clients who would come to us probably for routine work now. But anyway, just one added question here, because you talked about the role that has evolved, the GC role. Do you see any difference between the Indian perspective or Indian position of GCs vis-a-vis the global corporations internationally outside of India, their GC role? Because, I don't mind mentioning this. This whole concept of empowered GC, of course, it's very good, etc. But some people still have questions that to what extent really an Indian GC is empowered. I know I'm kind of treading on very dangerous grounds, but just wanted to hear you on that.
Yeah, no, I see. I can only really answer this from my own perspective, and I
Sure.
think in my experience, I've been very fortunate to have worked with organizations where GCs are very highly empowered, and it's especially the case with my current organization, InterGlobe Enterprises. And in fact, my predecessors, who are of course much more dynamic and much more capable than me, they have gone to do great things outside of a legal role. So my immediate predecessor, Nina Gupta, um, stepped away a few years ago from the legal function and is is an executive director within the organization. She's also leading one of the businesses excellently. And even before her, there was Aditya Ghosh, who left the legal role to become the head of Indigo as the CEO. So I think so. Interglobe, of course, is a slightly, perhaps unusual um, Indian corporate at that sense. But I think legal is very highly empowered uh, here. I mean, about others, I don't, I can't speak from experience, but I do believe that, things are changing over time, and increasingly you come across new roles opening up in the market within organizations that perhaps one would have thought of as very old school, promoter driven and all that. But uh, you know there seems to be a great appetite to hire um, you know general counsel who are able to operate independently and think strategically. And I think it becomes more and more important again when you have these firms, these organizations looking for uh, raising either PE investment or listing, where the role of an independent GC becomes more and more important.
Sure. Now, taking a cue from what you just said, and actually the central theme about your role, what you do, what you handle. I mean, what exactly are you looking for in an external counsel? What is it that you kind of take it as a determining factor or factors when you choose to work with an external lawyer?
Great. No, thanks for that question. I think because it's something that I think often comes up when I meet external counsel, and this may not be the case with all corporates, but in our case, at least, we believe we have a good in-house team. We have a lot of people who have come from. Everyone has got in the team has got prior law firm experience, in some cases, several years of law firm hardcore transactional experience. Um, so, and also to add to that, experience on international transactions in foreign jurisdictions, either as associates or even partners who worked internationally, or it could be, as members of Indian firms or Indian corporates doing deals overseas. And I think, just as a sort of as a sidebar, I should mention that the quality of Indian lawyers in general has increased a lot. And I think we are far more exposed to international ways of doing things, concepts of common law, English law. We're far more exposed to all of those than perhaps we had the opportunity to be in the past. But so coming back to your question, I think the point I wanted to make is that the basic stuff, I think we all understand, and I like to think that we're good lawyers in house. We expect at least that standard from external counsel. We what doesn't help is if we going to a firm where we don't get good partner time, but in fact are dealing with associates who are more used to churning out cookie cutter type um, work products without really understanding the legal basics behind that. So that's not something that we look for. So the point I think is that if we are going externally, we are going for two reasons. Either it's a bandwidth issue where then it's we are looking for a pure value versus quality balance. So who's giving you the best value for money? And if it's not that, then we are going for somebody who is providing advice or insights that we are not capable of developing internally ourselves. Again, of course, there is the value proposition question over there as well, but
Right.
you're looking for somebody who knows the basic stuff but can move a step beyond. Or it may be actually in some cases where in-house lawyers actually know the answer already, but you need an external law firm to provide a written opinion, or to substantiate your point of view, to do some good research that you don't have the time to do. So, in short, we're looking for high quality, but at the same time, the value proposition is also important. Um, I think gone are the days where at least Indian corporates are uh, comfortable paying by the hour, just having the meter running without, any control. I think from experience, that's also the case with international clients as well now.
Right. Absolutely. No, but I have a question for that on what I heard from you just now, that value proposition. So let me give you a hypothetical scenario. In fact, it's not that hypothetical. We are actually facing that situation in respect of one of our clients. Um, so, like you said, sometimes clients do um, know the answer, but they need an external firm or external lawyer to validate what they already know. Okay. So they reach out to the external firm, and the firm holds a different opinion or a different viewpoint on any interpretation, let's say. Okay. So my question to you is, since you are looking for value proposition, are you inviting the external legal advisor to actually challenge your view, your stand? Would you welcome that, or would you simply want him to mold the opinion to kind of, justify or sort of validate the position that you have already taken? What is your take on that, these issues?
Interesting question. I think so. Look, um, there are often times where we might go to an external lawyer and say, look, this is what we want to do, and the only way we can do it is if we get an opinion of this kind. Okay. My experience has been there will always be a firm who will give you an opinion that you like, no matter what. But there will always be somebody who will give you some very solid reasons why he can't give you that opinion. And that is, mind you, at the risk of that person losing out on the business.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Uh, but I would say that my regard would be much more for the person who is unable to give me that opinion, says he's unable to give me that opinion, provided he can give me very sensible reasoning as to why he can't do that. I mean, just saying that, I this seems very difficult to do, or it seems like the RBI is not going to look kindly on this, is not really of help,
Not the
right?
answer.
But if somebody says, look, if you were to do this, you go ahead and do it, but these are the risks. So if I were you, I wouldn't do it. That is that advice is of value for me. And that person, it may be that that person is either not billing for that, giving me that perspective, or he's billing maybe 15 minutes for a call or something like that. But mind you, I will always hold that person in high regard. And look, in our business, I think, you know, having long-term relationships and developing long-term respect is very important. So
Absolutely.
that's the way I would put it. I mean, there is short-termism and a long-term
Long
approach
term
there.
view. Yes. No, I'm completely with you. And in fact, it's good to know that you'd want to have somebody say no, but with solid reasons, because otherwise saying no for the sake of just saying it doesn't make sense. Completely get that. We are actually a little now close to the time, so I'll try and wrap this up, Chris, quickly. But couple of questions on lighter vein. It's not an apple to apple comparison for sure, but is there some aspects of your former professional life, which is a law firm world, that you miss in your current role?
Not not that much. I would say I'm quite happy to have made the shift. However, I must say that, when I look at some of my colleagues and juniors, they, in terms of remuneration, um, they, working in house is not as rewarding as being in an external role. So, of course, there also there is a, there's a wide range,
Wide
but
range.
I do know people who have been my juniors and earn perhaps exponentially more than I do. I mean, it's, I must say that the in-house salaries are very good, extremely good nowadays. Um, but it's not the same as what, let's say, a law firm partner in, say, in their early 40s in a top tier law firm is going to earn, a huge amount today. So that's one thing. I think also linked to that is that um, external lawyers are able to travel a lot, socialize a lot. So that's something that I think is, it doesn't happen as much in-house roles. But actually, that's about it, really. I mean, otherwise, I'm very happy to have made the move.
No, that's fantastic. But I mean, is it also the case? Because this is what I have heard for some people when they make this transition from that of an external lawyer to an in house role, is that this whole thing about work life balance. So, is that really a thing? What do you say?
Um, I mean, it can be, but not necessarily. So I think, look, um, when you're in-house,
Mm,
you never, you know, you never switch your phone off, right? And in fact, my wife often asks me, so what are you going to be doing today? Or what are you going to be doing this weekend? Are you going to be working this weekend? And I can never answer that because I simply don't know, right? I think with things can be a little bit different in external roles. Of course, it really depends on what sort of relationship you have with your clients. But if you're, in many cases, transactional lawyers are able to, they have an idea of what the workflow is looking like. So while they work intensely hard,
mm.
they're able to carve out time, allocate time for themselves. So that, I think, is a bit different if you're at least in a GC role. Um, Work life balance, other than that, I think, at InterGlobe, our people work very hard. Um, but at the same time, what at least I believe in is to allow people the flexibility to, for example, work from home or work remotely for some time. I mean, right now, I am not sitting in my office. I'm in the UK because my family lives in the UK. So I am here. I'm operating to India time, but I'm working. So um, that's the way one creates flexibility, creates a better work-life balance. But um, at least in the roles that I have done, it's not been my experience that there's a tremendous improvement in the quality of my life since I came in-house. You know, but you have to make that happen. It's not something that the organization will automate, or the role automatically provides you.
No, fair point. Fair point. So, I would like to pose the last question, Chris, and this is something which you said almost at the start of our discussions that you did this transition fairly late. I think you were already 15 or 17 years into the profession when you decided to join Mahindra. Now, for some of our younger colleagues, viewers, etc., I mean, as a seasoned professional now who has seen both sides, is there any career choice advice that you would like to give? That if you want to make this transition, what's the right period? Is it waiting for 15, 17 years like Chris, or sooner or later? What's your thought?
So I think, look, it depends on the kind of industry or the kind of role, obviously. But I believe it's really important that you have, at least in the early years, some very good training. And invariably, my experience is that that kind of training comes from law firms. There could be in-house roles as well. So, for example, you know, um, ICICI for many years, has been recruiting from, the best law schools, including your law school, and they have, they have developed some of the best legal minds. So. but so where you work is, whether it's in-house or with a firm, is less important. I think it's the role and the kind of training that you're going to get. I think that becomes hugely important. Um, but at least uh, for my team, because we do such a lot of transactional work, it is very important for us to have somebody who has got that kind of legal training to start with. So and so we typically would look at people from law firms. Um, I think also, to be, if you are looking for an in-house role, you must remember that you're going to be doing a mix of things when you come in. So, you know, having some litigation experience, even if you're in, if you are doing transactional work, you know, understanding how transactions or transaction documents translate once you have a litigation, that is also very important. And I think in that, with that in mind, I think people who come from maybe slightly smaller firms, where, or at least firms where roles are less siloed, for want of a better word, they perhaps are at an advantage, because a diverse or mixed legal experience becomes very important in an in-house role.
Somebody who can actually roll up the sleeves and get his or her hands dirty. You are looking at that kind of profile, perhaps.
Yes, and also people who are not restricted by their past experience and are willing to
Take on
do
new
things they've
challenge.
either not, yeah, do things they've not done before, or at least have some kind of good basic legal skills that enable them to do that.
Yeah, and the point that you made about having some litigation experience is extremely important, I believe. And this is what I tell my team members as well, that if you have done some litigation or at least know what a courtroom inside of a courtroom looks like and what happens, you are better equipped to handle anything that is thrown your way. So that's the point. Anyway, I think, Chris, this has been excellent. Thanks so much for taking out the time to talk to us today. And it was a real pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks very much, Raj. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank
Thanks
you.
to Kochhar and Company as well.
Thank you.